It's the first Monday in October, meaning the United States Supreme Court is open for business. You might be thinking, what about all those emergency docket and applications and rulings over the summer, Popok? They didn't go on vacation. Well, that may be true, but now officially the 25-26 term is open for all those regular, normal writs of certiorari petitions for appeal, not the emergency docket, although that happens too. But I already know what's going to happen in the next month or so at the United States Supreme Court, and we cover it on the Legal AF podcast, and here's a clip.
So all the Supreme Court's been saying, which actually has a merits impact, because if Trump's able to do the unlawful thing, by the time it reaches the Supreme Court, it's often moot. The people are deported, the people die, the funds are removed, the agency's destroyed. So the Supreme Court right-wing fascists are trying to be cute. And they're like, well, we're not ruling on the merits. We're just doing procedure. But they know effectively it neuters the case because Trump has the time to then engage in the unlawful acts because the Supreme Court's pausing what the lower courts are doing. And that's the major issue right now that we're dealing with. If the Supreme Court didn't do that on certain key cases, then there'd actually be some layer and level of accountability. But we have to face it. We have an authoritarian right-wing fascist Supreme Court run by 6 lunatics, by and large. And it pains me to say that as someone who went to Georgetown Law, who used to admire the Supreme Court, who thought this was once an august body. But you see across history lessons and across the world, Supreme Courts in other countries capitulating to authoritarian regimes for whatever reason. But they are arms of it. When we come back, I want to talk about what the Supreme Court's been doing. That's a good segue there and more. Let's take our last quick break of the show. A reminder, make sure you subscribe to Michael Popok's YouTube channel. That's the Legal AF YouTube channel. Okay, everybody subscribe there. Subscribe to the Substack, the Legal AF Substack. And if you or anyone you know has been injured in an auto accident, a trucking accident, you've been injured by the negligence of others, victim of sexual harassment or sexual assault, call 877-POPOK-AF or go to thepopokfirm.com, thepopokfirm.com, or call 877-POPOK-AF for a free case consultation. Or if you or someone else you know has been injured, give Popok a call. He's got lawyers across the country here to help, already helping many, many, many a Legal AF listener and watcher, with thousands of Legal AF watchers and listeners having called. Again, consultation's free. Then they take the case on a contingency, meaning they don't recover unless you recover. Last quick break of the show, home stretch coming up. We'll be right back after this last quick break.
You know that nostalgic feeling of sitting at the breakfast table as a kid and pouring a giant bowl of cereal that just tasted amazing? Well, Magic Spoon has reinvented that feeling with cereal and treats that bring back the flavors you love, but in a way that actually fuels your day. Every serving of Magic Spoon's high-protein cereal packs 13 grams of protein, 0 sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, and the flavors straight out of your childhood, fruity, cocoa, and frosted. And then there are the Magic Spoon treats, crispy, crunchy, airy, and ridiculously satisfying with 12 grams of protein in every bar. They come in mouth-watering flavors like marshmallow, chocolate, peanut butter, and dark chocolate. Perfect on the go, pre or post-workout, or even as late night snack. Here's how you try them. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/legalaf, or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/legalaf for $5 off. Did you know the liver is the second largest organ in your body? It's responsible for over 500 functions. But for some reason, liver health doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Over 30% of Americans have a sluggish liver, a problem that often goes undetected until the very last minute. Dose is on a mission to educate us all on why it's so important to maintain your liver health, and has created an incredible product to help you do just that. I mean, I found a clinically supported, potent, and effective solution, and I can't wait to share it with you. Dose for Your Liver was formulated to cleanse your liver of unwanted elements, aid digestion. I mean, it acts as your body's filter, flushing out unwanted elements and breaking down what you consume into essential nutrients. The liver produces and regulates cholesterol, stores vitamins and minerals, and impacts digestive and metabolic health, among many other things. Dose's science-backed formula promotes liver function, aids digestion, eases bloating, and even boosts energy levels. In a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial, Dose for Your Liver lowered liver enzyme levels by 50% in over 86% of participants. Stick with Dose and feel the incredible benefits over time. More energy, better digestion, reduced bloating, healthier liver enzyme function, reduction in brain fog, and better sleep. One Dose for Your Liver shot is equivalent to 17 shots of turmeric juice. Dose is gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and vegan. Save 30% on your first month of subscription by going to dosedaily.co/legalaf or entering legalaf at checkout. That's dosedaily.co/legalaf for 30% off your first month subscription.
Welcome back to Legal AF. Great to see everybody again. Thank you to our sponsors. Discount codes in the description below. They help us, help them, and they're great products and great services. So check them out. All right, Michael Popok, let's talk. I was mentioning how even Trump judges are ruling against Trump at the district court level because the stuff that he's doing is blatantly illegal over and over and over again, like blatantly. Like you couldn't write an easier con law question for first-year law students about Trump's behavior. Is this constitutional or is it not constitutional? Basic stuff. But, the Supreme Court is doing what it's doing. But let's talk about this Trump judge out in Oregon, how this judge got the case to begin with, and what happened this week. And then let's talk about the opening term right now for the Supreme Court. And off to a bang, you can say, Michael Popok, off to a bang. So talk to us first about Oregon.
So in Oregon, there was a very quick filing by the attorney general there and others. It's a governor who's also blue to stop the National Guard from rolling into Portland and other places. Now, look, I know people on the ground in Portland, in Oregon. I'm sure you do too. It's been generally peaceful protests. It's been, I wouldn't call it a love protest, but certainly it's not marked with the type of violence or looting or other attacks on federal offices like we saw during some of the Black Lives Matter movement, not by the actual protesters in Black Lives Matter, but by those who were trying to take advantage of it, like Antifa and things like that. That's not what's happening in Portland. People may not like some of the encampments and the sort of a little bit of the laissez-faire attitude about how the streets look, but that's not the equivalent of we have a rebellion or insurrection on our hands in Portland to allow Donald Trump to federalize the National Guard and quote unquote clean it up. Now we know what Donald Trump is doing because he said it out loud during that cosplay of a military brass review at Quantico last week that you and I covered extensively, including saying, well, I think we're at war and we're at war with some of these states. And I think we should use the military to go after these states and use it as a training exercise for when the military goes after the enemy. I can tell you, the ones that are still in the military were sitting there stone-faced. Veterans have come out and said, what the F was that? In terms of being so demeaning to the military, so demeaning to women in the military and blacks in the military, that the consequences of that speech are still reverberating and will for quite some time within the rank and file and the command structure of the military in ways that Donald Trump and Hegseth, because they're too smart by half, could never have envisioned. And you're starting to hear the reporting by news wires that are dedicated to military affairs and the life of people and soldiers and things. So you got that going on. And so right off of that, he goes into Portland, threatens to go into Chicago. It originally gets assigned to a judge who set a very fast briefing schedule. So fast we were talking on our own text chain about when I should cover it. Should we wait now, wait for the hearing? When's the hearing? That kind of thing. But it was going to be very fast. Then the Trump administration objected to the fact that the judge was married to a Democratic congressperson. And I don't know why to be frank, it's because of the obedience and obeying that unfortunately even the Democrats do. There was no good reason for the judge to step down. But having watched, Judge Merchan and his family get bashed, Judge Engoron and his family get bashed, Judge Chutkan and her family get bashed, Judge Zinnis and her family get bashed. This judge was like, you know what? We don't need to give him that talking point. So I'm gonna, I enjoy my other brethren here in the courthouse in Portland. So I'm gonna let it go back and go on the wheel. It gets assigned to a Trump appointed judge. But if the Department of Justice was celebrating and high-fiving, I think that quickly got smacked out of their face when they got into the hearing. Now, she hasn't yet ruled, but the judge was none too kind. It was very hot in her bench comments about the Trump administration and the justification that they were using to federalize the National Guard in Portland. She lives in Portland. People that live there, like you live in California and I live in Florida, and we experience it in real time in not the fictitious world, made up world for political points that Donald Trump lives in. I lived in New York for a long time. Donald Trump calls it a scary, violent place. He's watching too many 1970s television shows or those set in the 70s in New York. It's not any of those things. And Portland certainly isn't the crime infested, out of control, violent. It's almost incoherent to argue, or incongruous to argue, that Portlanders, is that right? I think so, are violent. They're not. He doesn't like the fact that they're massing in front of ICE buildings, but and this is where the rubber is going to meet the road when we get to the Supreme Court. You are allowed to take to the streets and protest. You are allowed to be vocal in the public square. If it crosses over into inciting and violence, then that's where the First Amendment does not come to your rescue. But short of that, we want to feel uncomfortable in the public square with comments. You want to shout back, you shout back. The only violence that's happened is clashes between pro-Trump protesters and anti-Trump protesters, but ICE hasn't been involved. And these are the facts and the evidence that was put before the judge, who lives a life in Portland and recognizes that this is a tremendous amount of overreach. We haven't yet, at the time we're on the air tonight, we haven't yet got the ruling. It may come any moment now. It may come on Monday. But I don't think this delay is to the Trump administration's benefit. I think there's going to be yet another decision consistent with what we saw with Judge Breyer, or what I call the revenge of the senior status judges against the Trump administration. I think it's going to be more like that than what I first heard was like, holy shit, we're cursing a lot on this episode. It's a Trump appointed judge. I wonder what's going to happen now. And to your point that you made at the top of the segment, it's actually a good thing because it takes away the talking point when she rules ultimately, hopefully, against him. It'll end up in the same Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, because that covers Oregon as well, for those that are not in our world, as the Judge Breyer decisions about California. And there's already some teachings up there that I'm sure she's going to have to figure out what's precedent and what isn't. But that wasn't a great hearing for him as he tries to continue to use the military against the American people. We still got the posse comitatus ruling. And just to touch on one point, this really is an unsung, unheralded group of judges that are hanging on by their fingertips for as long as they can to issue rulings that maybe they think other judges who are younger than they are and aren't out, maybe one day going to be retiring. The service that these senior status judges are doing to stay in office during this Trump administration we can't talk enough about it. We can't compliment them enough. The Judge Breyers, right? We just got an amazing ruling from Judge Young in Massachusetts, a Reagan appointee. Breyer, I think he was a Clinton appointee. Judge Royce Lamperth in D.C., another Reagan appointee. The senior status judges in their late 70s and 80s are purposely staying in to defend democracy and the rule of law, and to fight against the Stephen Millers who think it's cute because, he changed the name of the Democratic Party and he used the Republican Party in a different way in his statement, which is really an incitement to violence. But the Stephen Millers and they're trying to win this in the streets, and we're winning in the courts. And that's important. Now, just to answer two quick questions that have come up. Staying in a senior status doesn't block Donald Trump from appointing new federal judges. Once they go senior status, it opens up a new spot, but they continue to take cases, and they can take as many cases as they want. Some of these senior status judges are pretty much full-time, and I don't think that's by accident right now. They're like, no, I don't want to go play golf or go fishing. I want to stay here and make decisions that other judges may be too timid to make at this important junction. And one thing I want to note at 11 months into this administration is how few federal judges are being confirmed or even nominated by Donald Trump, because there aren't a lot of vacancies, because a lot of judges are hanging on and they're not retiring early. And there's no openings for him right now. So some people might be thinking, how come Legal AF and Popok and Ben don't talk a lot about this judge and that judge and this? Because it's not going on. Trump's had a couple of appellate appointments to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, one that got on already in Bovee, but there hasn't been this filling of federal judge positions, which is a good thing, because every minute that Trump is not filling one of these positions is a good event for the rule of law. And then you switch to the Supreme Court, where you said, you're right about it, the batting average for democracy is about 90 to 93% at the lower court level against Donald Trump. But at the Supreme Court, it's over 84% winning percentage. And to answer the question that I had to do a little research for during our break, the Supreme Court and the other federal courts are open through the shutdown through October 17th because they found money. I love when these organizations find money. They found money in their accounting from fees because every time we file something, we got to put a check with it. They found enough money to pay everybody through the 17th. And then after that, they feel like they can stay open because they're an essential service under the Anti-Deficit Act line of cases. So there will be the first Monday in October and the first Supreme Court case's oral argument of the new term. So that is leading us. You want to talk about the new term?
Let's talk about the new term there, Michael Popok. I think you broke it down great, though. So if you can talk about, we're already seeing Ketanji Brown Jackson and others, call out this shadow docket behavior and what the Supreme Court's been doing. Let me toss it back to you, Popok, and if you can, hit for us the main highlights of what people can expect and what we've seen already.
Yeah, great. So we've got Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is regularly writing dissenting opinions in the shadow docket cases. Just to do another teachable moment here, there's two ways that cases can get up to the Supreme Court for some sort of appellate ruling. One is the old-fashioned way that you and I learned about in law school. I didn't even know about the shadow docket in law school. It wasn't something we talked about because none of the cases in our case book, I had books, you probably had an iPad, but I had a book. And in that case book, the cases came from the old-fashioned way. You do a writ of certiorari. The court looks at it. If there's 4 votes to consider it and bring it up to the Supreme Court, they do it. 5 votes to rule in somebody's favor. And you caucus and you decide and you list the case and you delist the case. And then there's 3 sets of briefs, maybe more. Then there's amicus or friends of the court briefs. Then there's an oral argument 5 or 6 months later. And then there's deliberation. And then there's opinions being circulated the old-fashioned way. Some are the majority. Then there's the dissent, the concurrences and statements. You put it all together and you issue the opinion. And that is supposed to speak to the American people about the jurisprudential underpinnings, the logic of the case, the law that's being made or upheld or reversed, the new law that's being made. And then it's also there to guide federal judges below the Supreme Court about the next case and what's precedent. Now we've got a Supreme Court who literally says out loud, and I now have a new name for them, the MAGA Six, Amy Coney Barrett Roberts and the rest, they just come out loud and say, we don't think precedent is precedent. Clarence Thomas said out loud at Catholic University, among other things. He said, no, I don't think the precedent's gospel. I don't think I have to follow it. Sometimes the precedent's wrong. Okay, I'm glad we're not doing stare decisis and applying our precedent any longer. So that's the old-fashioned way. The way that undermines the credibility of the Supreme Court, if that's even possible now, given their current reputation, and does not provide proper guidance and leaves the lower courts twisting in the wind, and ends up being a procedural, what appears, there's a thin veneer of it's a procedural ruling only, not on the merits, but it's really on the merits, is through the shadow docket, which is an emergency application that's directed to one of the justices for that particular circuit, who then decides whether to make the ruling on their own, or now they have their new habit is they just refer it over to all 9 to make a decision whether they're going to stay, it's usually on a stay, block a federal judge, lower court decision, appellate court decision that's probably against Donald Trump. And by blocking that decision, even though it's not on the merits, it really is, because it takes the person out of a job, like the National Labor Relations Board or the FTC, or it defunds a program never to be restarted until the Democrats take power, or it destroys the Department of Education or federal funding overseas, or whatever it does, but only for a time. But a year from now, we'll come back and we'll look at the merit. A year from now, there's no program. A year from now is a year of human suffering. It's a year of women not having a certain right, or immigrants being denied due process, or voters being denied the ability to vote for the candidate of their choice in a district of their choice. And that's why these emergency rulings end up being an actual substantive ruling, because it has that kind of impact. When you say under the Fourth Amendment in a 1 paragraph, we're going to grant the stay. When you say that therefore becomes new precedent, it's 1 paragraph. And when you rip effectively the Fourth Amendment against illegal search and seizure out of the Constitution and you do it in 1 paragraph, that's a problem. And it's a problem when you do it, when you give the president the spending power of Congress and give the president, in the name of Trump, a pocket rescission to be able to cut federal aid overseas, even though the Congress has allocated it because it's his foreign affairs powers infringement, and you do it in a paragraph, that's a problem. And so Ketanji Brown Jackson has been religiously writing dissents about the abuse of the shadow docket to effectively make major constitutional rulings on a short circuit, on a short track, without a proper record, without proper briefing, without the deliberative process that the Supreme Court is known for, and issue these rulings that change lives and change precedent. And if we thought, which I sort of did at the top of this administration, that these shadow dockets, because they keep saying, well, it's not an indication of where we're going to ultimately rule, it's just on the stay. If that's not precedent, we were like, is that really precedent? Oh, yeah, because Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have gone out of their way in concurrences to chastise federal judges like Judge Young up in Massachusetts, who said, well, I understand there was a funding case about the National Institute of Health, and they allowed Trump to cut off the funding, but I'm over here like Department of Education or something else, and I think my facts are different, so I'm going to rule differently. Oh no, you're being disobedient. You're not following the precedent of the Supreme Court. And all the judges are like, the precedent of the Supreme Court? This Post-it note? That's what you want us to follow? Then give us the jurisprudence, give us the facts, give us the law, give us the logic, the ratio, the gravamen, and we'll apply it to our next case. And judges are fighting back, even though, for instance, even though Judge Young got chastised and was like taken aback that he was being called defiant at the age of 80 as a Reagan appointee, Judge Lamperth, who just issued a ruling against Carrie Lake and Voice of America, he repeated it. He said, I can't apply this precedent. This isn't precedent, this 1 paragraph. And I'm not going to allow the Trump administration to abuse and exploit these 1 paragraph rulings. So that's the 2 things that we're seeing. So to answer another question, does the emergency docket and emergency applications stop when the new term happens? Is that just something that happens in the middle of the term? No, emergency dockets happen during the term. So we're going to be talking on Legal AF, and then I've got a show on Legal AF YouTube channel called Unprecedented that I do weekly with Dina Dahl, where we look at the Supreme Court. There's going to be a mixed bag. It's going to be like, well, this is the regular docket, the 60 or 70 cases that they're going to take regularly, including the first case up on the docket, which is a case about transgender athletes. And there'll be emergency applications like right behind that. This job has now become 24/7 for the United States Supreme Court, and they're not doing well. I'm talking about the MAGA 6. Justice Kennedy, who we used to call it the Kennedy Court because he was the swing vote, even though he was a moderate Republican. He ended up being in the majority more than any other, but he retired. He didn't stay on until he died. And he's come out now and said, what are we watching with the shadow docket? He's almost embarrassed by the Supreme Court. I just did an interview with one of our contributors on Legal AF, Lisa Graves, who just wrote an amazing new book, an expose of John Roberts, and how John Roberts and the other 5 have hijacked our Constitution, which is now up on Legal AF YouTube channel. So look, we've got cases that go to transgender rights that are coming up in the first several weeks. We've got cases about immigration rights. This is on the regular docket. We've got some voting rights. We've got some Second Amendment cases that are back. Another one about, can a restaurant ban, now we're in trouble. Can a restaurant put a notice that no guns are allowed? Well, you know what's going to happen there, Ben, on the Second Amendment. They're gonna take a John Wayne movie and make it into a documentary. Oh, well, there used to old-timey times. You went into a saloon, you went up to the bar, and you got a shot. You had a gun on your side. Oh, here we go. Second Amendment now, a restaurant, you're going to have guns in restaurants and bars. That doesn't sound like a great idea. You have that going on. You've got the major case for me that we're watching, but I already know the result, which is going to be the destruction of Humphrey's executor, which has been a firewall to protect executive agencies created by Congress. We got that weirdo thing where Congress creates the agency, but the executive branch needs to execute on the agency. And the Supreme Court has said, well, it doesn't matter what Congress wanted. If they turned it over to the executive branch, he can fire at will and restructure that, and he can put it out of business. And we're all like, really? Yeah, that's it. That's what you can do. Maybe not the Federal Reserve. We'll get back to the Federal Reserve in January. There's a big hearing now on Lisa Cook in January about whether she keeps her job on the Federal Reserve. So you got on the emergency docket. So you got all that going on. And then finally, the way they framed Humphrey's executor, which was the thing that said you can't fire except for cause if Congress says so. They've said, should we be, this is the question presented, and this is why I know it's dead. Should Humphrey's executor be able to prevent or should it be able to impinge on the executive power under Article 2? I'm like, oh, okay. Why don't you just make the ruling now? Why do we have to waste time with the briefing and the case? Just make the ruling. And tell us you want to destroy Humphrey's executor to let Donald Trump fire everybody but maybe the Federal Reserve. Welcome back. We sit at the intersection of law and politics twice a week for an hour-long podcast, 5 years in the making, called Legal AF. Watch us on YouTube. Download us and listen to us on audio podcast platforms like Google and Spotify. Leave 5-star reviews. This is the hummingbird effect. This is how we get to the top of the charts, all because of you. If you're on Midas Touch right now, hit the subscribe button. If you're on Legal AF YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I think there's a pattern here. If you want to hear from us more and you're jonesing for more Legal AF Substack, where we do live reporting twice a day, in addition to a lot of written commentary, become a paid member of Legal AF, the Substack. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.